Good morning. Good morning. This is Valerie Leonard. I'm the founder of Nonprofit Utopia. I want to welcome you to today's live stream. We're going to be talking about how to develop a nonprofit marketing and communications plan. So, all this month, we're going to be focusing on marketing. So, this week, we're going to just give you a very broad overview of how to develop a marketing plan. And over the month, we're going to be drilling down to more specific topics as they relate to nonprofit marketing. We suggest strongly that you go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have close to 100 videos that you can look at in, a number of topics in nonprofit management. All right, so without further ado, I am going to share my screen. I'm going to share the presentation. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to post them in our chat box. And then after the presentation, I will be sure and go over all the comments and respond to them. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to email me at valeriefleonard@nonprofitutopia.com. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and get started. Thank you very much. Alrighty, so as I indicated before, we're going to be talking today about how to develop a nonprofit marketing and communications plan. Again, this is Valerie Leonard with Nonprofit Utopia. And just to give you a little bit of background about who we are Nonprofit Utopia, the ideal community for emerging nonprofit leaders. Now, emerging can mean different things to different people, but for us, we're talking about anyone who is beginning at a certain point of their journey of nonprofit management. So that can be people who are just starting out, it could be career changers, it could be people who are looking to be advanced in their particular industry, in their particular organization. All right, so we're here to give you all the tools that you need to move to the next level. All right, and we've created a strong online community where people can share their concerns and talk about issues, in a very, very safe environment. And our mission is to develop the next generation of ethical nonprofit leaders. And we do this through ongoing professional development. And we typically do it through consulting. We have an engaged community online, and then we also have coaching available and courses. And our vision is to actually make an impact on the global nonprofit sector. And we're going to be providing training to emerging leaders throughout the world, hopefully about 50,000 between now and 2033. Give you a little bit of information about myself. I specialize in community and organizational development, and I have recently founded Nonprofit Utopia LLC about a couple years ago. And I also host these live streams and the Nonprofit Utopia Blog Talk radio show. I teach online courses at UIC, and in person, I teach social enterprise at Roosevelt University. I have a Master of Management degree from Kellogg and also an undergraduate degree from Spelman in economics. Alrighty, so we've got a lot to cover today. We're going to be talking about the relationship between a strategic plan, a business plan, a marketing plan, and a communications plan. So as you notice, all of this stuff needs to flow together. Otherwise, you're not going to have you're not going to be able to communicate your message in a coordinated fashion. You'll be all over the place in terms of what your communications are to different people. And then that makes it very difficult for people to know what it is you do, what you stand for, and how they can use your services. So it's very important to have a cohesive marketing plan and make sure that it's in alignment with everything that you do on the strategic level, program development level, fundraising level, etc. We're also going to show you how to develop and implement a comprehensive marketing and communication strategy. We're going to show you how to reach key constituencies. We're going to show you how to brand your organization's products and services. And then we're going to show you how to develop marketing and communications budgets and implementation. All right, so we'll start off with strategic planning. As you may recall, we just spent a month of strategic planning about a month or so ago, a couple months ago. And we learned there that strategic planning is a process in which an organization takes stock of its mission, vision, and core values to position itself to capitalize on the changes in the current environment. At the end of the day, you end up with a set of strategies to achieve a set of long-term goals and objectives for the organization. And basically, it answers the questions, where do we want to go? How will we get there? And I would venture to say that it also helps you to do that within the context of who you are. So that's why you start off with your mission and vision and then go from there. Alrighty, so when we talk about a business plan, we're drilling down to a more specific level. We're actually looking at the programs and services or products or a social enterprise. So after the organization has taken stock of what's going on in the environment, after they have developed strategies, then they go down to programs, and the next level is developing your marketing plan. So that is looking at the operational and financial objectives of your business, of your program or your service. And it also contains the detailed plans and budgets showing how the objectives are to be realized. Business plans can also target changes in perception and branding by the customer, and it can also be applied as it relates to our clients, taxpayers, or larger community. So depending on who you are as an organization, that will determine who your target is. So when we look at a marketing plan, we can make sure that we focus on a specific product or service or program. And each one of your programs, products, and services might be part of your overall marketing plan for the organization. But ideally, you should also have strategies within each of those products, services, and programs that will help you to apply to your marketing strategy. Depending on whether you're talking about your organization, whether or not you're talking about an issue or policy or product or service, that could determine your various marketing tactics. All right, that's why it's important to have a marketing plan, for each one, for everything that you do, and make sure that it's in alignment with your strategy. So your marketing plan supports the strategic plan and your business plan and your program design. And it also summarizes your objectives, and it describes your target markets. So that's looking at your community. It looks at the products and programs, services, fees, the distribution channels. And when we talk about distribution channels, we're talking about how you're going to actually deliver those services. Will your distribution be within several facilities? Will your distribution channels be online? So it's basically, the place at which your clients come in contact with your services. And then we also have to look at the communication channels. And your communication channels are those channels that let you know how you're communicating. So it could be through social media, it could be through newspaper articles, it could be through news shows, et cetera, et cetera. And then you want to make sure that your plan also has, the budgets and implementation schedule. So again, why is marketing important? As I indicated before, marketing is important. It needs to amplify your message, and your message always starts with your mission. And it's also important because if people don't know what it is you do, they don't, they don't necessarily know how to perceive you in the market. So it's very, very important to use your marketing as a way of communicating a very cohesive plan and strategy to your various targets. All right. So Carter McNamara, he is a well-known practitioner in nonprofit. According to him, marketing is a wide range of activities involved in making sure that you're continuing to meet the needs of your customers and they're getting value in return. So notice, in many instances when we think of marketing, we're thinking about, just get the word out, just get the word out. But it's much more than just getting the word out and promoting. It's making sure that you can communicate value. And we'll get into that later on. But marketing is a combination of several activities, and that includes things like market research, market analysis, ongoing promotions, advertising, public relations or PR, sales, and customer service. And you might think to yourself, well, why would a nonprofit get into sales? A nonprofit is always in the business of sales. You are selling your community to let them know that you're a good neighbor. You are selling your donors, hoping that they will invest in your mission. You are selling potential clients, hoping that they will either buy your services on a sliding scale basis or even use your services. You have to actually sell people to get them to use free services. And then marketing is also about ongoing relationships and customer service. So some of the tools that we use for market research are very similar to the same tools that we use for community needs assessment. So I invite you to go to our YouTube channel, the Nonprofit Utopia YouTube channel, where we did a whole series on community needs assessment and strategic planning. So you'll use some of the same tools such as surveys and questionnaires and interviews. And your surveys and questionnaires, those are used to measure attitudes, knowledge, and preferences, and they can be used to gather either quantitative data, which is numeric data, or qualitative data. So your closed-in questions, that are scaled, those are used to get your quantitative data, and your open-ended questions on these surveys where you're asking people's opinion without giving them any choices, and just letting them respond, those are qualitative. And the value of surveys and questionnaires is they help you get behind the numeric data that you might be collecting in other places. And the interviews, those are used to supplement your survey data, and they give you, as well as your your subjects, the opportunity to delve deeper into certain questions. And again, the purpose for the interviews is to get behind the numbers that you might be collecting in other places. And your focus group discussions, those are basically group interviews, and you want to get a group of similarly situated people when you do your focus groups. So these could be people that reflect a particular segment of your market. It could be a group of board members. It could be people that represent a certain segment of partners that you might, be trying to attract. So basically, you want to make sure that you're bringing together people who have something in common where they can have a really rich discussion, but you also want to make sure that these people reflect the ideal segment that you're trying to reach. Another way you can gather information is through public meetings, and you want to use these meetings not only to educate the public about your organization, your programs, and your services, but you want to use that as a give and take where you're giving information and you're getting information back from the audience. Other ways you can gather information is through a literature review. So you look at what has already been done in other communities, other parts of the country, and see what people, what lessons people have learned, lessons they've learned the hard way, what to do, what not to do. And you might want to use that literature review as an opportunity to identify different methods or different models that you want to take and copy, for lack of a better word. And you want to tailor it to to your particular community. And when you do this, make sure that you give credit where credit is due, right? It not only is an ethical practice, but it shows that you're well aware of some of the latest developments. And it also shows that you thought through your process and you weighed different alternatives. And another way of getting information is through asset mapping. And that can be used to, one, locate the different assets in the community. And when we talk about assets, we're talking about people, we're talking about organizations, we're talking about institutions, we're talking about informal groups, all of these different segments of the community that can be used or be tapped into to help your organization meet their goals and objectives. So you want to know where your assets are, and then you want to also focus on the positive. When we look at the assets, we tend to not focus so much on the negative, and how our communities can be needy. All right. So when you do your market analysis, you want to have a number of guiding questions. And ideally, your marketing analysis should be done, after you do your community needs assessment, because a lot of this information would have already been captured. But if it's not captured, you want to answer questions like, what's the current environment like? Who's already doing the work that we're doing? What groups of customers are out there? And the way you answer that question is you'll look at census data that will give you a snapshot of, the demographics, in a community, their age, race, ages, and all of that good stuff. And then you can segment the market that way. And then you want to ask yourself, who do we prefer to serve and why? And again, you use that demographic data from the census to help you to answer that question, but you don't want to leave it at just demographic data. You want to also use the information that you get from your surveys, use the information you get from your focus groups, use the information that you get from your literature review. So your market analysis is going to be multi-dimensional. You want to pull information from different places. And then you want to really understand what your customers' needs are and how you can satisfy them. And then you want to know how to develop programs, products, and services that really meet their needs. And when we do that process, looking at the needs and aspirations of our target market, and then ways we can satisfy them, then we begin to create value. And then you also need to look at your own internal capacity based on what you're finding objectively. And when I say objectively, is what the data is telling you. What do the data from your surveys tell you? What does the information gleaned from your interviews tell you? And you pull that together, and that will give you a sense for what the market is telling you that they need. That you can identify the gaps. And then you want to ask yourself as an organization, do you have the capacity as an organization to meet that need? Other questions you might want to ask, will we need to enlist other stakeholders? How do we make sure that our services are culturally relevant? How do we actually reach the target market? And then what are our competitors doing? And what can we provide in terms of services And can we provide those services in a cost-effective manner? And when we look at the idea of cost, it needs to be cost-effective to the organization, and it needs to also be cost-effective to your clients. In many instances, we give free services, but if you're going to charge for the services, you need to make sure that your fees are within the range of what people can afford. All right, so that begs the question, what pricing, if any, do we use? And then we pull all that together and then we ask ourselves, who is our target and what benefit will they expect? And when we talk about the benefits, we want to look at how their lives are going to change as a result of the interventions that we provide. And when I talk about interventions, I'm talking about our programs and services. And you want to make sure that their lives are changing as a direct result of what you're doing, and you want to be able to track that data. And then you ask yourselves, how can funders use our program to further their internal mission, vision, and goals? So remember, you're in partnership with the funder. And then the next set of questions are, what value can they expect? So again, what pains do your programs and services alleviate for your clients? And how do you help your clients to actually achieve their goals? And how are your services designed to meet your clients where they are? So if you're familiar with our value proposition canvas, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you are not familiar, you can go to our YouTube channel, and we have videos on the value proposition. And the most common, the most popular one is getting to their why. All right. So you want to really understand what your customer goes through on a day-to-day basis, and your customer is going to vary. Your customer could be a client you're trying to serve, by giving them programs, products, and services. Your customer could be a funder, right? Your customer could be a potential partner. So, regardless of who your customer is, you're going to need to really understand what it is they do on a day to day basis, what they aspire to, what their pain points are. And then you are going to deliver programs, products, and services to make their lives easier, right? So, those programs, products, and services are going to meet a need, they're going to help alleviate the pain, and they're going to help people to actually achieve what it is they set out to do. All right, so that's where value comes in. All right, and remember, it's not value added to the customer unless they're one, willing to pay for the service, and that's for profit, and it's not a value if they're not willing to use the product. So if you're giving away free programs, products, and services, it's of no value to your client if they're not willing to use. All right, so taking all of that into account, how do you position your organization, your products, your programs in the community? And remember, positioning is just a manner of, what do people think of when they think of your organization? And regardless of whether or not you have a marketing strategy, all of us, all of our programs already have some positioning. And our goal is to be intentional because, people already have some impression about us. And we as marketers, we as executive directors need to be sure that we're communicating what what we intend to communicate, right? So how do we position our programs in the market? For example, a provider of high quality housing that is affordable to the residents who currently live in the community, with a low cost alternative to predatory lenders. All right, so that's a way of positioning yourself in the market. It's also a way of shaping perception the way that, ideally your organization wants to be perceived. And you know that you're successful in your positioning if the people that you're targeting begin to parrot the messages that you have created without being prompted. All right. So, what competitive advantage will your organization, your program, service, or product offer? So in this example, we've got the Camden House is the only facility in the community that provides safe, decent living quarters for emancipated minors while ensuring that they stay in school and receive job training that results in living wages. So we got to remember that marketing is fundamentally about providing the correct bundle of benefits to the end user. Hence the saying, marketing is not about providing products or services. It's essentially about providing changing benefits to the changing needs and demands of the customer. And that comes from Pete Taylor. Alrighty, and that also comes from learnmarketingstrategies.net. All right. So again, you want to position, look at who your competitors are. And I know in nonprofit, we don't like to look at other nonprofits as competitors, but the truth of the matter is everybody is competing for a limited pool of money. So you need to know who else is doing what it is that you're doing, how they do it, and then figure out ways that you can differentiate yourself in the market such that, if clients have a choice, one between the other, that they come to you. Same way with funders, regardless of what your target is at the moment, you just have to figure out, the answer to the question, why, right? Why should I hire you? Why should I use your service? Why should I fund you? All righty. Now, at this point, we're going to get into the 4 P's of marketing. And the 4 P's are product, price, place, and promotion, right? So the first thing is our product, program, or service. And before I go further, if you could just type in the chat box what your organization is, what is your product, what is your program, what is your service? And I'll check those out, after I'm done with the presentation. And it'll be really interesting to see, who's listening and what your programs, products, and services are. The next P is the product. It's the price. And you may or may not be charging a price for your program services. You might be doing it for a sliding scale. But you also have to remember, too, when you're doing your proposals, your funder or your prospective funder is going to, get a sense for what your overall cost is, right? Your cost for providing the service. And if they're comparing you against another organization and your cost for providing the service is significantly higher than, a similar organization that's serving the same community, then they're probably going to go with that lower cost per client or per person served. And then you also want to look at your place. What's your distribution channel? Is your distribution channel a physical office? Is your distribution channel online? And when we talk about distribution channels, we're talking about the place where your client or your target audience can actually, get in contact, physical contact with your service, right? So how are you providing it? Is it online? Is it in a physical location? Do you have more than one location? And then we also look at promotion, and promotion is that word of mouth. So how are we letting people know that we're here? Are we letting people know that we're here through social media? Are we letting people know that we're here through emails, through advertisements, by being on talk shows and all that other stuff, through blog, being a guest blogger. So whatever your promotion mix is, that's the section, that you include it in. It's under promotion. So now we're going to talk about a brand. And a brand is basically, how your organization, product, or service is perceived in the marketplace. And that's going to be that perception. Hopefully, you're driving the perception and being very, very conscious about the perception. And it's also the emotional and physical relationship that you have with your customers. And again, regardless of whether you have a marketing plan or you're being conscious about developing your brand, you already have one. So your brand is your reputation. What do people think about when they think about you? So it's in your best interest, your organization's best interest, to shape or to influence the perception that others have about the organization. So a brand is not a logo, even though your logo can support the brand. And a brand is not necessarily your program or a type of product or service. Your brand is the whole totality of the experience that people have with your organization at every touch point, or from start to finish of their services. So if they have an interaction with somebody on the street, with your board member or somebody who works there, right? That's shaping your brand. What is the interaction like when they call your office? How likely are they to get good, clear information? How likely are they to get the information that they need on the first call versus having to call multiple times? What impact has your service or program had on their lives? After they get through the program, what do they tell other people? All right, so your brand is a combination of all of that. So branding is really important because it builds goodwill. It helps your organization to position itself with various segments of the market. So you can use branding to position yourself with people who give money. You can use branding to position yourself as a good neighbor, as a good partner within the community. And you can also use branding to reach out to potential clients and let them know that you're in the community, you're here, willing and able to serve them. Now, you're going to have different approaches to different segments of the market. You wouldn't communicate to your donors in the same way that you would with local residents or with the same messages. I mean, overall, the message is going to be consistent, meaning that, overall people are going to know that what your organization does is in the best interest of the community, but the language you use, the approach you use is going to vary based on who it is. So again, your donors, you might communicate with them one way. They may be concerned with quote unquote impact. What impact you have to the community? How are you making a difference in the community? How are your goods and services impacting or making a difference for your clients' lives, right? A community, they want to know, yeah, are you doing what you say you are? How do you relate to the community? Is your organization an island unto itself? Does your organization mingle with the people? Does your organization work well with others, play in a sandbox well? Or are you an organization that seems to see yourself as somehow different or somehow superior? And even if you don't intend those messages to be conveyed, your engagement strategy can make all the difference in the world. So again, the strategies you use with the community are going to be a little bit different. And then the strategies with your potential clients, the people who are actually going to use your services, you need to make sure that one, you're communicating that you can be trusted. And trust is a number of factors. One, it's do you tell the truth? Two, are you capable of doing what it is that you said that you're going to do? Three is does does your organization have a good rapport with its clients? So organizations with strong brands tend to be more successful for obvious reasons at attracting money and other resources, volunteers, in order to make the impact on their clients and community. So how do you build a brand? All right. And when we talk about building a brand, we're talking about making a concerted effort to shape perceptions. So again, like I said before, whether you intend to or not, we all have a brand, all right? And that's based on people's experience with your organization. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to type out in the comments section, what is your organization's brand? What does your organization want to be known for? All right. So how do you build a brand? You start off with a SWOT analysis. So when we talk about a SWOT analysis, we're talking about looking at strengths, we're talking about looking at weaknesses, and the strengths and weaknesses are those characteristics that are pertinent to or that pertain to the organization. So they're characteristics of the organization. When we talk about opportunities and threats, we're talking about things that are beyond the organization's control and they're happening in the environment or in the community and it can impact their work. And then, drilling down to a marketing level, you're looking at, what is it that we do best? What are our capabilities? How do we want people, our target clients, how do we want them to perceive us? What makes us different from the competition? And then the weaknesses, sometimes the weaknesses are in our own communication. How are we communicating our brand story? Do people get it? So the way you know whether or not people get it is the way you describe yourself, your organization, your products and services is the same way that someone, who's not prompted, if you ask them what do they think about your organization, products and services, if they say the same thing, then you know that you're successful. All right. So when we look at the opportunities, can we identify an expanding market for our products and services? So again, this is where that demographic data comes into play. If you can see that there are certain targets, say elderly people, you see that population is trending upward or even trending downward. If you see that youthful populations are trending a certain way, hopefully an increase, then that helps you to determine, whether or not there's actually an expanding market for your products and services. And then you also need to understand, the lay of the land, what's happening in the community, what's happening in the city, what policies are in place that can impact our work. And then threats, are there external factors that would prohibit our organization from promoting our brand or even from meeting our mission? Again, these are things that are outside of your organization's control, happening in the community, things that are happening in, at the state level, at the federal level. Then you think about who are your competitors and how much you actually know about them. And then you might want to do an analysis, looking at how you stack up against the competition. So after that, you want to review your SWOT analysis for opportunities to message. And again, when we talk about messaging opportunities, this is not necessarily the same as the opportunity that is in the SWOT analysis. So you want to look at the data and the information that you get from the SWOT analysis. So what have you learned about who you are, what you do, how you do it, and why anybody should care. And based on that, then you begin to shape your messages. And then you want to determine what messages your audience want or need to hear. And that is based on all of that research that you've done before. And that would be particularly um, coming from your interviews, from your surveys. All right. And that'll help you to understand what it is they want to hear. Because sometimes the things that we think are important about our brands, about our organization, the people who actually use our services could care less. All right. And then you want to create a messaging package. So that could include things like your tagline, your mission and vision statement, anything that would support those. You might want to collect stories, have a logo. So a messaging package is simply a compilation of the core messages that you want your brand to convey. And the reason why it's important to collect those stories is not necessarily because those stories are going to be your brand, but those stories help you to actually demonstrate that your brand is one that can make a difference. And you can also shape your messaging through those stories. What lessons have you learned through those stories, and how are those lessons relevant to others who might want to use your service, or others who might consider donating, right? And your messaging package is also meant to help you stay on message. All right. So if you're paying attention to campaigns, our presidential candidates, they both have messages. Some are very, very focused, and then others are a little bit more scattered. But it's really important to stay focused and build consistency with your messaging, and make sure that those messages are consistent with the brand that you have. Make sure those messages are consistent with your mission, vision, and goals. So before you finalize your message package, you want to go back to your focus group and get real reactions about your messages. You want to make sure that you heard what you thought you heard, in other words. Okay, so here's an example for affordable housing. Everybody agrees that there's a strong need for more affordable housing. However, almost nobody wants affordable housing built on their block. We all heard of Not in My Backyard or NIMBY. We want affordable housing. Even in some of your low-income communities, people don't want affordable housing in their communities. So for years, affordable housing advocates emphasized the needs of the people being served. However, audiences did not like the idea of quote unquote subsidized housing for needy people in their communities. All right. And in some communities, affordable housing, the people who live in affordable housing actually make more money than the people on average who live in the community, because they're different affordability standards, but that's a discussion for another day. But you want to make sure that you're communicating your messages in a way that people can receive your message. So when people talk about the affordable housing for needy people or subsidized housing, folks in the community were up in arms. The message was changed to emphasize the positive impact that the housing would have, like tax benefits. And when we talk about tax benefits, we're talking about, if they're building this house, then, if we're building this house on a vacant lot, then vacant lots that didn't generate any tax revenue are now in a position to generate tax revenue. All right. So when you talk about the impact, the positive impact of the same affordable housing, then it becomes more acceptable to the community. So for example, again, I want to just finish this sentence. When the message was changed to emphasize the positive impact such housing would have, such as tax benefits, shoppers that would help maintain downtown, or diversity in the schools, the housing became, viewed as an asset and not so much as a drag to the community. So I guess I'm going to ask you, if you're there, if you can share an example where your organization has introduced a message, they've introduced a product or service that might have been somewhat controversial, and what you or your organization did to actually change the perception. Alrighty, so here are 3 guiding questions to reinforce your brand. The first one, how do you promote your organization's message in a way that people can understand and get behind it and want to identify themselves with? All right, so I guess here, here's the challenge. When we do our market research, when we do our interviews, when we do our literature review, et cetera, all of this stuff to collect the data, and then we write our reports, 9 times out of 10, when we're doing the analysis and writing this stuff up, we're using language that might be high school or even college level. We need to take that information that we're using for our reporting and for all of our research, and we need to actually distill that down to simple language, to sound bites that people can really, really understand. So, some people recommend 3rd grade level language. Some people recommend 6th grade language or even 7th grade. But you want to make sure that you make it plain. And then the second guiding question is, what do you communicate to your community about your cause? And then 3, do you have a logo and a tagline that clearly conveys what your organization does and is passionate about? So when they look at that logo, when they look at that tagline, they know immediately whether or not they want to be involved with you or your cause. Other questions, do all of your promotional materials use the same language to get your point across? Are your messages consistent across all channels? And is the language and is the message conveyed in such a way that is perceived to be your particular organization, so that it is unique to your organization? Do you use 1 or 2 narratives when making presentations or when meeting with donors that clearly illustrate why your cause is important? So this gets to your brand story. And these should be simple stories using real life examples of how people benefit from your work and how the donor will benefit from supporting that work. Do you manage donor support in a way that makes you stand out from other organizations? Do you have a unique recognition program so that you can show how your donor money is being put to use? Okay, so there are a number of ways to build your brand. And again, whether you're being intentional about building your brand or not, you have a brand. Your brand is your reputation and how people perceive you. So when you think about building your brand, think about how you want others to think about your nonprofit. Again, you're going to have to help shape those perceptions and communicate those messages over and over again, not in a way that you're being a nuisance, but you want to make sure that you're communicating those messages consistently so that people begin to have a certain perception, and hopefully that perception is the same that you want to convey. And you want to make sure too that people understand what's in it for them and why they should support your cause. So it's not about you, the organization. It's always about your client. It's always about the donor and what they're trying to achieve. It's always about the client and how you're going to help them make their transformation. So working from here, you can then build a communications and public relations plan to promote that message in a way that makes people feel good about supporting your nonprofit. All right, so very closely aligned with marketing is your communications plan. So, a communications plan outlines strategies and ways that you're going to communicate to convey critical information regarding the organization, its mission, vision, values, goals, strategic plans, programs, etc. You want to make sure that even though you may be communicating about different things at any given time, that they all tie into a larger overarching theme that you're trying to communicate. So your communications plan summarizes the communication goals and objectives, and it supports the strategic plan, the program design, and your marketing plans and your fundraising. So before you create the plan, you want to refer to your strategic plan, your program plans and marketing plans, and your fundraising plans and your case for support. So you want to make sure that everything that you're doing is in alignment with your mission, vision, and and goals. All right. So you want to ask yourself a number of focus questions. So what is the mission and vision of your organization? Where are we today as an organization and where do we want to be in the future? What are our overall goals? Do our current communications efforts support our goals? What barriers do we have to overcome in order to reach our goals? And then what are some of the benefits? And how do we know that we're successful? Again, what are the barriers that we have to overcome to reach the goals? What are the benefits? How visible is our organization now? Do we need to increase our visibility? Do the people that we need to reach even know that we exist? And even if they know that we exist, is there anything compelling that will make them work with us, that will make them use our services? What are the current skills of our staff? Do our staff have the skills that they need in order to interface with different segments? Do we have skills who can interface with our donors and communicate our message? Do we have people on our staff who can interface with the community and reinforce our message? If there are gaps in skills, how do we fill those gaps? What training does our staff need? Do we have, if we have to hire somebody, do we have the funds? Can our budget support a consultant? What is our annual budget for marketing and communications? And does our budget align with our strategic priorities? Does our budget sufficiently support communications efforts? Are we familiar with similar nonprofits and what they're doing with their strategic um, communications? What can we learn from others? And what is it about others that we admire? Do we have some of those similar characteristics as an organization? And do we want to communicate those? And how do we communicate them? So when you develop your plan, you need to have goals, right? Goals and objectives. You need to have a target audience. So your goals and objectives really tell you your goals tell you what you want to achieve. Your objectives tell you how you're going to achieve it through communications. And then you want to have your target audiences. Again, your target audiences can be donors, they can be people from the community, they can be people who actually use your services. So, what messages do you want to communicate to each one of those constituencies? And then you want to look at the timetable. So what is the time frame for this plan? Is it 6 months? Is it for a year? Is it tied to your organization? Is it tied to a project, program, service, a business, right? And when I say business in this case, I'm talking about a social enterprise that might be associated with a nonprofit. So you want to look at the budget, you want to look at staff, their skills, and whether or not you need to hire a consultant. And then you, most importantly, want to make sure that you've got buy-in from your board and top management. And then, some people, a common question is how much money should you be spending for marketing? You should typically allocate, anywhere from 9 to 12% of your budget on marketing, no more than 12%. And then you want to make sure that you have a budget prior to the start of each fiscal year. So now is a good time to get your communications budget together. You're near year end, you're developing your budgets for next year. Make sure that you allocate anywhere from 9 to 12% of your total budget for your marketing. And then you want to make sure that you track your costs, do budget versus actual to make sure that you're on track. And then you want to make sure that you integrate the budget into your annual marketing and communications plan with the dollar costs allocated to each strategy. So, for example, if you have several strategies and your marketing strategy includes direct mail, email, paid advertising, media relations, etc., you want to make sure that you indicate how much money you're going to be spending on each one of those strategies. And then you also want to do that for each one of your programs or products and services. And all of that together should come out to no more than 12% of your total organizational budget on marketing. And you want to make sure too that you budget for the tasks such as researching your audiences and evaluating the outcomes that give you the information to take your strategies and make them possible, make your reality possible. All right. So here's an example, the percentage approach. And in this case, we're going to establish the percentages of the major components of the communications budget. For example, 2% of the budget will be for advertising and promotion media, including newspaper, radio, TV, and direct mail. And for direct mail, that could be postage as well as the production. And then the next one is producing. That's the design and artwork for your collateral materials, printing all communications, and this includes newsletters, brochures, websites, press kits, etc. And then another example is 1.5% for producing special events, 3.5% on salaries, consultants, and freelancers, and then 11% is the total percentage of the organizational budget. All right. So here is an example. Here's an organization with a $100,000 budget. They have allocated 2% of, I'm sorry, they have allocated $2,000 for media, and then they have used 40%, almost 40% for printing, and then 1,500 for special events, and then salaries 3,500 for a total of 11,000 or 11%. So we've got 2,000. This 2,000 is 2% of this 100%. Of this $100,000 budget. So remember here, 2%, 4%, 3.5%. Those correspond to this. So 2% of that $100,000 budget is on advertising and media production, and that comes out to $2,000. 4% of that $100,000 budget is spent on printing all the communications, and 1.5% or 1,500 is for special events, producing them, and then about $3,500 or 3.5% is spent on consultants and freelancers for a total of $11,000 or 11% of the budget. And then implementation, that's just, how are you going to get from the planning stage to actually executing, right? So you want to look at your marketing goals and the tasks that are required. You want to look at the time frame. You want to make sure that you give assignments to people as well as deadlines so that you can have accountability. And then you want to make sure that you have a budget that includes the revenue that you expect to generate as a result of all of the activities of your organization, including the marketing. And then you want to include the expenses. All right. All right. So if there are any questions, feel free to post them in the chat room. I'm going to be checking. But if you have questions beyond this, you can go to Valerie F. Leonard at nonprofitutopia.com. If you are a member of the Nonprofit Utopia Network, you can post in our community, post any questions that you have. You can also set up time for office hours. All right, we encourage you to follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, and I am now going to check for any questions. All right. Good morning, Roberta. Good morning, Darlene. Good morning, Wilbert. All righty. Are there any questions? Did you guys have any questions, any comments? Did you want to share any of the experiences that you've had with marketing or any of these, any of these principles that we talked about? All right, Wilbert, thank you so much. Thank you for that comment. We really appreciate it. And then Leslie, thank you very much, Leslie. Leslie is a member of the nonprofit Utopia community. All righty. Any other questions or comments before we sign off? All righty. So I want to say thank you, and thank you. This video will be available on YouTube later on today. Take care. Bye-bye.